Welcome to Just Another Podcast. I'm host Justin Soderberg, and I'm here with John Cassidy. He's a good friend of mine, but also driver and owner of Last Ditch Racing, which is part of the way I found my way into his life. But the other one was my industry that I work in the beer industry. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
John is known not just in the rally community, but him and his wife are known downtown Bangor at breweries and restaurants. They're a frequenter, and I feel like their extended family is us who work in the industry as well. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about how John would fix a flat tire for someone or whatever, and I feel like the people that are at the top of those lists are the people that serve you food and beer regularly.
Absolutely. It's a really, you mentioned that, and it's kind of a good way to enter. I was born here in Bangor, and back in the '80s when I was a teenager, that's a long time ago. Downtown Bangor was dying and or dead, and so we had relationships with restaurants or small niche kind of places, and the mall's now in foreclosure and downtown's booming. We're in the middle of virus issues, but so instead of this exodus of people away from the town, away from Bangor, Old Town Orono, people are staying, and it's great. And I have to say, the majority of our friends, I think, are probably 20 years younger than we are, which is awesome. And but it's great to see, because I think the craft beer industry is similar to music and art and other things. It's a creative process, and so having you and everybody else that's in the industry stay is fantastic for all of us old folks who are still here.
It's cool too, because there's always something new, and it's like you could have, like, you guys have this social life, like you and your wife have this, like, you want to be with people, but it's also not the same thing over and over again. I mean, you go to places like, you frequent places like Nocturnum and even Orono Brewing Company, which is like every time you go in there and you're like, hey, there's a new beer on draft or a new food menu item. So it's not like you guys are just getting the same thing, the cheers. Everybody knows your name, but it's something different every time you go in, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I like that creativity, and Nocturnum having the art gallery aspect, and people having live music, and you guys have had some up there at Orono, and it's just really cool. And we never know who we're going to see, we never know what we're going to talk about, and we just love that kind of social aspect of being out and about. It's certainly not the cheapest way to exist, but it's we love it, and we wouldn't have it any other way. So
well, we have a big thank you to you and the other people that I've met through the industry. I mean, my best friends I met through the industry, basically regulars at Gagan's when I worked there, Mike and Karen, but they pay our salaries. So thank you, John and Dana, for paying our salaries. We appreciate it. It may not be cheap for you, but I have a living because of you. And, but I mean, John and
we hope.
Yeah. But the funny part is that John, I met kind of at Nocturnum randomly, but I didn't know how I knew him, not knew him, but knew of him before. And that's with Last Ditch Racing and New England Forest Rally, because I saw you race cars through the woods, and I didn't know you were behind the wheel. And, John's wife is a girl I went to high school with's mom. Again, small connection that I didn't know. And we ended up reconnecting at Nocturnum a number of years ago now. But John's passion, one of his passions, I should say, is rally racing. How did you get started in this?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I didn't, my dad was, he loved cars and motorcycles and anything that was motorized. He had an experimental aircraft like membership to that group, but never flew. He had a ice boat kit. I remember he always had all these interests. He didn't pursue them all, and I think he wanted to, but he was not a mechanical guy. He didn't have anybody that showed him when he was a kid how to do this stuff. And when I got into my 30s, I ended up buying an old Land Rover, which was good and bad. It was great because it got me into this community of Land Rover people. and this was kind of before the internet, or just at the dawn of the internet. I know it's really, makes me feel old, but back in 98 or so, ESPN2, which used to be a thing, which makes me think of ESPN 8, the Ocho from
Yes.
Dodgeball. It's a little rabbit hole, but anyway, so ESPN2 had the Maine Forest Rally on one day, and I'd never seen Rally, and Carl Merrill, who was a fellow Mainer who is now passed away, he was winning, and I was like, what is going on? There's people racing through the woods, and there's a guy from Maine, and he seems to be like really good, and I'm like, I really need to do this. I think for some reason I just felt moved to do it. So I had a Ducati motorcycle at the time. It was after my dad had passed, and I really loved the bike, but in order to fund rallying, I decided to sell it, and bought myself a Honda CRX, which was a really cool car, but it was not really a rally car, but we made it into a rally car, and we rallied it for a year or two. But once, I always tell people with rally, once you start, it's really hard to stop. And this is our 21st year, even though we're not going to be racing this year. But so we raced, and we raced a lot, and then we segued into Subarus, and we've been with Subarus since probably 2000 or so. So 2001, yeah.
It's funny too, because you do it because it makes you tons of money, right?
Yeah, no. So someone asked me the other day, actually, they said, do you have any sponsors? It was someone new that I had met, and I get that question a lot. And I told them that there's actually somebody on Facebook Marketplace. I met them randomly, but I was in my van, and it had the logo. And I said, the problem with sponsorship is that that there's not a lot of value in what we do for sponsors, because we do it in the woods, and it's out of sight of people. It's not a circle track. It's not, oh, you can see me every lap. It's like you have to be hardcore. And the other thing is that sponsors usually, rightfully so, would have some needs. And those needs are sometimes hard to meet, because this is not our full-time job. It's our hobby. So when they say, we'd love to have your car in New Hampshire this weekend, I'm like, well, I'd love to do that too, but I've got, I've either got to work, or I just got done working, and, and then I got to pay for a hotel and gas and people. And so it ends up being, we decided it would be easier, not financially, but easier from a stress standpoint, to do everything out of pocket. And, we take great pride in the fact that we built the car ourselves. We run it out of our shop. Some of the other rally folks in the past have said, well, you must be nice to have a 6-figure budget. And I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about, but it's not us. And so our car now is probably, it's 17 years old, and it's got probably 40 races on it, and it's still going strong, and we're the ones that built it and maintain it. So, so since that time when I was not mechanical in my early 30s, and now, unfortunately, I know how to do most things, and I can weld, I can take a transmission apart, I can take an engine apart. I'm not saying I'm a pro, but I can follow directions and get it done.
It is funny though, because it's one of those things that you think of growing up and seeing these people, seeing you drive through the woods, you'd think, wow, that's amazing. They obviously, the driver behind the seat is not the guy who owns the car. That's what you think of. Because when you look at like your NASCAR drivers or your IndyCar drivers, the pilot or the driver is not the owner of the vehicle. There's a big corporation or big owner who owns it, and someone else drives it. And it reminds me when I found out you were the one that actually owned, like when I was younger and found out you were the one that owns, or someone owns this vehicle is actually behind the wheel. It reminds me of like in Iron Man, when I think it was Iron Man 2, when Tony Stark leaves his $1 billion like luncheon and goes out and gets in the Indy car and drives around. I'm like, that's John Cassidy, because he owns the car and he actually goes out there and drives it. But
Yeah.
it seems you do portray like you have a 6-figure budget, because you were able to do quality car, quality look. You have your Last Ditch Racing and you have your van, so you look like you have a big budget, which is cool, because those people who are not immature, but novices to the industry or the sport, it makes it look like I want to cheer for you, because you look like you have this. You put the persona on that you have this big team.
Well, we had a lot of we emulated a lot of the people that were established in the sport, the factory teams, the Subaru US team, the Subaru Canada teams, Stuart Ho from Canada, who ran that team, and obviously John Buffum and Lance Smith from VT Car over in Vermont doing the Subaru US, and the Mitsubishi US team. And we got to watch all these guys, how they did service, how they presented themselves, how they tips and tricks and other things. And they were happy to share, and we were happy to take those things, because the competition for rally folks isn't in the service area, or it isn't, honestly, people don't really care. Like, I share things that we do with our car all the time, because, if you need those preparation tips or whatever, I'm happy to give them to you. And if you beat me, fantastic, but I'm hoping you don't. But, we were able to brand ourselves fairly early on. We met a guy named Craig Woida, who, interesting thing for you, because I know that you're into, animation and comics and other things. So he was a video game graphic designer out of California. And we met Craig, I think, at the Rim of the World Rally in California in 2003, and we became friends. And I ended up hiring him to design our logo for the team. And he had done all these really cool graphics and done a lot of rally car illustrations and other things. And so we partnered with him, and we partnered with a fellow named Chuck Stevenson from Maine, who did the current livery for the car. And I had sometimes I get these kind of semi-manic episodes or periods in my life where I get really creative. And I'm like, I think we need to do this. And I wish they would happen more often, but they happen every once in a while. So the design for the car, the current design, we haven't strayed from it, because I love it. And people are like, aren't you going to rewrap the car or get a new car? I'm like, no, I love the car.
And it costs money.
It costs money. It costs a lot of money. So it's like, but I mean, it's like anything else. You surround yourself with people that are better than you are at these things, just like, in your business and everything else. It's like everybody's got their niche. And, I reached back to Craig to design a logo which combined my Irish family crest and the rally logo and my blood type and some other things to put on my helmet. And he did he gets excited about it. I get excited about it. We don't exchange a lot of money. It's not, and I talk him up to anybody that I can. And he doesn't have to talk me up, because he's got nothing to say about me. But, so we have all these contacts with people, partly because we've just been so long lived in the rally community. People like Tom Dedrick from Cartboy and other industry folks. And my son, John, who's co-driving for me, he asked me one time, Tom sent me a custom piece for the car. And he goes, how do you know him? And I'm like, well, I said, he's been in the business for about as long as I've been racing in Subarus. So, these are good people that make good products, and they're creative, and we love that kind of stuff. And rallying is it's a really interesting sport, and it's obviously addicting, because we can't stop. And I always joke with people. They say, when are you going to stop? And I'm like, when I figure out how to do that. I don't know.
And I feel like part of it might be like, if your car breaks beyond, like if you went to New England Forest, say it's New England Forest Rally happened this summer, and you went there and you totaled the WRX.
Yeah.
That would be the moment where I feel like John Cassidy would look back and go, okay, is it worth fixing, or is it worth getting a new car to do this next summer? Or is this basically the rally god saying you
Yeah.
survived this humongous wreck and you're good, and now it's time to move on to actually, like, do you still have that plane, like building the plane?
Yeah. So it's and that happened to us, and I can't remember what year it was, but we we've numbered the cars. So T2, which was our second Subaru, um, we essentially totaled at New England Forest Rally, and that was a really big. You go through all the stages of grief that they talk about. You go through this kind of, you're sad, you're bargaining, you're doing all this stuff, and finally you accept that you've wrecked your car and you've, all this money and time, and then you're like, and then you laugh about it because you're like, oh my God, I'm still alive and it's okay, and you have some beers and a good dinner with your close friends, and then everybody is like, oh my God, this is an opportunity to do something new. Because it's a creative process like everything else. So. But what I found over the years, and in that case, we bought a new car, the current car, T4. We skipped a number, and that's another story. But it took us, even though we had raced Subarus and we knew what parts to bolt on, it still took a good year of development. Even we actually had the car prepped by CanJam that ran the Subaru Canada team. And then we went out to Rocky. Our first event was, it might have been Pierce Neige in Canada, but I think it was Rocky Mountain, which is in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And we had a mechanical problem, and we were done within a stage or two. We'd flown out to the middle of Canada, had the car shipped out by train, and all this time and effort. And we turned around and flew home because it wasn't right. And we'd raced Subarus for years. And so any new car, people say, why don't you get a new car? I'm like, because it will take me 2 years to get it to where I want it to be. So even though this one there's a lot of things that I would love to have different. It runs, it goes fast enough, and flies far enough. And, so we're happy with it.
And just in case anybody like watching this or listening, what rally is, so just we should have started off with this, but rally is point A to point B racing in stages. So it's timed, so there's a couple of minutes or a minute or two, depending on the race and depending on the stage, between the drivers. You don't, with stage rally, you are not next to someone like a NASCAR. You drive from point A to point B, and whoever gets there fastest basically wins that stage, and then you can accumulate your time throughout the weekend. And so New England, we're lucky enough in Maine to have one in the summertime called New England Forest Rally that happens out in Newry and in parts of New Hampshire and in that area. It's by Sunday River. But it's really just, the idea is get from the starting line to the finish line of each stage as fast as you possibly can, and see if you can accumulate the slowest or the fastest time over the weekend. But the one thing that I will always say that makes me think that it's one of the most purest forms of racing is the fact that we talk about stages. Stages is point A to point B, but then you have to get to the next point A, and you have to do that on the road. So if your car barely makes it to the end of that stage because you get a flat tire or something's falling off the car, the brakes are not working, you still have to get that car to the next point on the main road. Like we don't really want to bring up Sunday River Brewing Company right now, but like you drive around that area, that you have to get on the streets on the main road to get to the next stage. And one of the reasons why I call it the most pure, what I think is one of those pure forms of sport too, is if John gets a flat tire on their stage and he wants to change it, him and his co-driver get up and jack that car up and change that tire. There's no pit crew team that comes out on your stage and replaces that tire. John actually physically replaces that tire, or depending on what stage it is and where you are on the stage, opts not to fix it at that point, so that you just try to go as far as you can. If you're like, hey, we're only X amount of point from the end of the stage, let's get to the end, we'll pull over after the end and fix the tire. So there's a lot of that goes into this cool things, and it's not just, a drag strip. If anybody's seen a drag strip before, it's through dirt roads most of the time, with trees inches from the track or the road, and there's jumps and there's turns, and it's if you haven't seen one in person, it's exhilarating. And I wish I could promote this summer, but like it's exhilarating to see in person for sure. Obviously, it must be behind the car too, behind the
Yeah,
wheel.
it's yeah, exactly. So we've had a lot of guys come through the team and go on to careers and rallying, or go on to start their own teams, and we really love to see that, and it makes us feel a little bit old, but it's a real microcosm for life, and it's a microcosm, the sport's a microcosm for um, problem solving, and just dealing with adversity and figuring out how to handle that in a way that I don't think that current generations are used to doing, maybe like other generations through the 40s and 50s and 60s even. They had to deal with some hardships that we didn't growing up. So so we have to manage the car, we have to manage resources, we have to manage ourselves, nutrition, hydration. We have to make these mental decisions, like you said. We get a flat tire, it's like, is it worth the 2 minutes? Do we drive the flat tire out, or is it better? Are we going to lose less time if we stop and change it? How quick can we change it? All these kind of questions and issues. And last year we had John and I were racing at New England, and we had I was just working on the car today, so we had no front brakes. We just had rear brakes, and it didn't take us long to go through those and smoke those pads. And so when I'd step on the brake pedal, the way it's set up, it would push on the accelerator. So when I'm trying to brake, the car's actually speeding up, and it's like, and I'm trying to figure out like we've got 2 more stages to do, and we got to drive back, like you said, drive back to service on a regular road. And so we've got to figure out, how do we do that? And how do we mentally deal with that stress of knowing that we're driving something that's not 100%. And I look at one of the things that we just watched, the Dragon, the Falcon X launch up the space station, and I get choked up with that stuff. And I think it's these guys just strapping in, and women, and for some kind of bigger purpose, bigger than themselves, and it's sometimes we, watching the Apollo 13 movie, when they have to time their reentry burn with their watches because they don't have the computers failed, and they're like, I gotta get home, I'm in space. It's like this crazy, like, none of us know what that's like. I kind of know what that's like, because I've been like in a car that I got to get back, and I got to nurse it and figure out, how do we still try to go fast, but yet take care of things and take care of ourselves. And mentally, like, things are not okay, but I need to be okay because I still need to go fast. My mom always says, go slow, be careful. And I'm like, Mom, it's a race. I'm like, I can't. And now she just says, go fast. So it's like, she finally got the idea. But it's it's a crazy sport. And every single person that's come to crew for us or race as co-drivers or other things, I've said to them, you need to understand that when you start this, you're not going to stop. They said, don't blame me or don't be upset. And they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And now, years later, so two of our crew members went to work for Vermont Sports Car on the Subaru USA team championship seasons. One of our crew members has gone on to work with Ken Block and still works with him at Hoonigan Racing. And we have three other guys right now, actually two that have their own race teams, and one that's building a car. And then my old co-driver, Dave Getchell, who was my co-driver for years, was also a championship driver in the NASA series and did his own thing. He had actually bought T1 and raced that on his own while he and I raced in T2 together. So it's like, interesting group of people. A lot of the people that race are really, I'm not going to count myself in them, but high functioning, I'm going to say geeky, highly intelligent people, accountants, Google, executives, cutting edge people thinking outside of the box, people that you wouldn't expect that are like want to go do something risky, but they do,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy. And I get out of the car and sometimes people are disappointed. They're like, "You're the driver?" I'm like, you did not.
I love
look
it. As I get older, I love it. I just turned 34 a couple weeks ago, and I love it because I'm like, hey, there's someone who's not a 21-year-old person behind the wheel of this car. You see too many race people that you look at them and like, that's a 14-year-old. They can't even have a license right now. Why are they driving a car?
Yeah. So we have people that come up to us and they'll say to us at New England Forest Rally, they'll say, "I've been here every year that you've been here, and it's just crazy that you guys are still doing this." And I'm like, as long as I'm healthy and, fit enough and can, why not? There's a lot that's interesting about rally. And I think for any adrenaline person, and I am not like, my late friend Dave Mura, who, was an X Games athlete, or even Travis Pastrana or some of these other guys, we don't get to do this stuff as often as they do, and it's not our job. So, but it's like you said, it's probably one of the most pure, like when you're doing it, there's nothing else that's going on in your world. I always tell people there's information that comes in through the windscreen, through our eyes, and then it goes out the back of our helmet, and then it's gone. We never go back. Like track racing, we never go back to that corner again. We see it, we do it, it's done. And if we make a mistake, we have to get over it because we got another corner, in 200 yards, and we got to keep going. So it's crazy.
In racing, it's probably one of the true team sports too, because of the fact that you do, with the stage rally, it's not like me playing dirt on my Xbox where it has a little screen of a map on the corner so that I can see what the next turn's coming up. John's relying on his son to tell him, hey, a left turn's coming up right now. Don't cut that corner because there's a rock there and all that stuff. And you have to trust that he didn't miss a direction, that he is not skipping over, or that the notes prior to it were done right. And like you mentioned, you go through that turn, you're never going to have that turn again. That turn may be next year. Like that stage, you might have to, and the road conditions can be completely different. There could have been a rock there that's now been removed. And it's just that relying on that team aspect of all of your mechanics to help you, but also the guy that's sitting in the seat next to you, and the guy in the seat next to you is relying on you to make sure that you're listening to him. And it's like that aspect of, you're both relying on each other. And you were mentioning about the mental capacity of it too. It must also not be very easy that your son's the one in the passenger seat too, that if you make a wrong turn or wrong problem, that it's your son, not just you.
Yeah. So I was thinking today, actually, it was interesting you bring it up. So I was thinking about all my co-drivers. So I want to name them. So Megan McCarty, James Altimus, Travis Smith, Adam Neat, Dave Schindel, Dave Getchell, of course, Eric Lee, Rob Sokolexis, and now my son, John Cassidy. So 9 different co-drivers. Jen Daly, I'm sorry. 10 different co-drivers in 2 countries, actually 3 countries, and across US and Canada. So people don't understand that we can't go, the reason we have a co-driver is so we can go faster, and the trust has to be 100%. And so we have a shorthand that we use, communication that we use that's really efficient so that we don't waste time or effort. And so it's a short, anybody that's played a rally video game has heard it or seen a WRC event. So the co-driver's reading the notes that we made during reconnaissance or recce, which is when we drive the road ahead of the event, which is a really long day. And so they're reading 2 or 3 notes, 2 or 3 corners ahead of where we're at. And we might be going 80, 90, 100. And if there's a hill and I can't see over it, a crest we call it, and they say flat crest, which means don't lift, don't lift. I have to trust that they know where they're at. They know where I'm at. And so we have to trust each other that I'm not going to hurt them. They're not going to hurt me. If either one of us is feeling like, there's an issue or that kind of thing, co-drivers get lost in the notes sometimes. Sometimes I don't hear the note or have them repeat it, and that throws them off. And so it's this constant, not only is it the car, like how fast is your car and how well built, but it's how well do you work as a team. And my son it's really funny because, it's a lot of eggs in one basket. We've got two of us and we have the same name. So it kind of freaks people out, but it's both John Cassidy's. And we did a stage at New England last year, and I thought it was really fast. And I said, what did you think of that? Because I was pretty pumped up. And he was like, well, I think it could have been a little faster. I think you could have probably, brake less there, or, whatever. And I was like, okay. All right. So it's definitely a team sport. The closest thing that I've seen to it is the jet boat racing that they do in New Zealand or Australia or wherever it is. And that's really cool and crazier than what we do, I think. Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of names. Dave Mira, rest in peace, Dave Mira. Dave Mira, for me growing up, was the BMX rider, not the rally car driver. Same with Bucky Elastic, and you have those people who were in other extreme sports, whether it be skateboarding, BMX, or whatnot. And then you have your guys like Ken Block, and it's like, as much as his philosophy, but his life has changed, if you want to say it that way, to what he's doing now compared to what, maybe he was doing years ago with DC shoes and so on.
Yeah.
But I will say that I will give him the utmost credit for bringing this generation, my generation, maybe a little bit younger than I am, generation, into what the sport of rally, because of what he was able to do on the internet and what he was able to do with his Hoonigan racing and the graphics and all the stuff he did. He made rally cool to those people who didn't know what the hell it was in the United States. I downloaded illegally 5 years of WRC coverage from the internet, and literally sat on my computer for days and days and days on end, watching every rally that happened, just watching it, seeing some of these guys for WRC being like, why the hell isn't this in the United States? Like, why isn't WRC in the United States? And then Ken Block comes out here and makes it cool. Not that it wasn't cool before, but he made it edgy and cool for young people.
It's like Ken and I are about the same age. We're like a few months apart, and I would love to say I'm as well known as Ken, but obviously I'm not. But it's Ken is a great guy, and he's such a great ambassador for the sport. He's quick, and he and Alex Gelsomino are a great team, and those guys. Ken is the kind of guy that I could email him tonight, and he would get back to me tomorrow. And as I mentioned, one of our previous teammates, crew members, works for him currently. And but yeah, he elevated the spectacle of the sport and the profile in the U.S. and Canada. And then started taking that elsewhere. And it's interesting in this day and age with the internet. People are like, well, he's not this or he's not that. You know what? He loves the sport. He's got great cars and cool stuff, and he's articulate. He's such a geek he's a nerd like any of us about the equipment and the events, and he's paid his dues. Anybody that straps in and does these things, just amazing. Dave Mira, I didn't know who Dave was because I wasn't of that generation. I was older than Dave by about 10 years. And so I met him in Missouri at a race, and I had no idea who he was. He was parked next to me at this park expose, which is where all the cars line up and people get autographs, and he was swamped. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. He needed a pen. So I was like, I got some pens. My co-driver had left, so I got some Sharpies, and we started talking, and then we became friends, and just a sweet guy. And he was so excited about the sport and wanted to learn everything that he could. Same thing with Pastrana. Travis Pastrana. We flew out to the X Games actually. I think it was Dave Mira's last X Games. We saw Travis do his double backflip. We saw Mira do a crazy big ramp thing, and it was just an amazing time. And these guys were looking for a way to, and Travis still is, to keep being active. Travis had a lot of injuries, and he got out of the car once at New England Forest Rally and he was limping, and I said he had a brace on his knee. I'm like, Travis, I said, what's going on? He goes, don't tell my orthopedic doctor I'm here. I just had surgery on my knee. And I'm like, well, what number is that? He's like 14 or something. I'm like, what? I don't know, what are you doing? But he was out, he's done stuff where he's taped his foot up, and whatever it takes for him to do it, he loves it. And it's a much safer, and now we've got Brandon, is it Simonek, the new Subaru US driver. Yeah.
I don't remember his name, but
yeah, but he's
it's him and Travis Pastrana now, right?
Yeah, extreme mountain biker. So I think for a lot of these guys, as they start to, the risk for what they're doing is really high. And even though what we do is extreme, it's a safe sport. And so you're in a car with a cage and fire system and everything else. So it's not like you're on a bike that you're going to get thrown off of, So and Ken has been. I went and visited DC Shoes, and around the time of the X Games, we went out, and Ken was still involved with DC at the time, and Rob Deerdeck and everything else, and just very, his marketing ability and business ability and everything else. I mean, he's just he surrounds himself with creative people, and that's what you got to do. And there's nothing, that's kind of what the sport needs. We talk about it all the time. Do we need a WRC event? What do we need? I don't know what we need. We just need to go racing. But, I don't think, we partnered with sponsors before, and it's been really difficult. It's really hard we like to partner with Maine companies. We work with Flowfold. We work with stabilizers that make these great grip things for shoes. Short-lived, not really, they're like, we're not sure what to do with you guys. So, it was easier for Ken because he had DC Shoes already. So he could just, and Mira had Miraco. So, and Travis has his own brand essentially. So, it's easier for these guys, and Red Bull and so forth. So,
it's funny with those guys you're talking about. You have your Miras, your Bucky Lasek, your Travis Pastrana, your Ken Block.
Yeah.
You have Dave Mira, who one of the, if not the greatest BMX biker in the history of mankind. You got Bucky Lasek, one of the greatest skateboarders of all time. You got Travis Pastrana, one of the greatest Moto X kind of guys of all time. A guy like Ken Block, who has the brand that's DC, that it's this all achieved greatness. And then we're like, you know what? Let's try to do something else. Let's get behind a wheel of a race car and try to drive through the woods. And it's just fascinating. Yeah.
And the fact that, now that you mention it, they all kind of funneled into rally. And I think that they all, I know that Mira talked with Bucky, they were doing rallycross together, but they were all like, this is cool. You should try this, this is cool and you're going to like it. And, and anybody would. So, there are people that in any, whether it's work or sport, who don't, who get jealous of people who have those resources and everything else. When I talk with Ken Block in the middle of the woods in Maine or wherever we might be, he's just Ken, he's not like or Travis, same thing. It's like, oh, there's Travis's kids, they've gotten bigger, there's whatever. It's like, it's this crazy traveling circus that we participate in. We all go and do this crazy thing. We have this shared experience in the middle of the woods in whatever state we're in or country. And then we go home, and it's a weird thing. It's this, because nobody else knows what it's like to do it unless you've done it. And then we go through this thing we call the rally hangover later, which doesn't have anything to do with drinking, It's just that it's such an adrenaline rush for that weekend that for the next couple of weeks, we're just like regular life seems like nothing.
Mundane. Yeah, mundane and just normal. It's what I will say about rally for anybody who hasn't experienced it. First of all, guarantee if you Google rally racing on YouTube, you'll see videos of, likely your top ones are going to be Pastrana or Ken Block or, some of these Sebastian Ogier and stuff like that, places from WRC. But I hated hockey, couldn't stand hockey. When hockey came on Nesson, when Bruins came on Nesson, it wasn't the Red Sox. I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna just turn the TV off. I'm done. Don't need this anymore. All set with this. Then I went to a hockey game and sat on the ice. It was an AHL game in Lowell, Massachusetts. I sat on the boards. Someone checked someone into the boards, and I've loved hockey since that day.
Yeah,
so I feel like racing, you can look at rally and watch it online, but until you sit, 10 feet from a dirt road, you see you or whoever is rallying hit, Concord Pond, and you go over that jump and you are in the air in a rally car, in a car that you probably could have driven here, meaning that there's people who drive Subarus to the rally. WRX is that. And you see this and you go, it's exhilarating, and you get to focus on one car at a time. That's the biggest thing I think about it is you see, Ken Block go by in his, Ford, his vintage Ford there that he ended up wrecking last year. But then you see you go by in a Subaru, and you see, someone raced a BMW this year, didn't they? Remember that? Yeah. They do that on street tires, I think it was. But like, you see one thing, you focus, cool, reset, have a beer, talk to your friends. 2 minutes later, another car goes by, and it's like, I don't know, just being in that experience and learning that. And that's one of the things that some of these sponsors should do. Because I feel like they just throw money at you if they sat there and watched you actually drive the car.
Yeah, I think, that the spectators for rally fans, and we have a lot. It's really heartwarming. I still get like messages, direct messages and other things from Canadian fans that are like, when are you going to come back? Because it's been quite a few years since we've been there, and we love Canada, especially Eastern Canada, to race. And the fans are great and everything else. But to be a rally fan, you've got to be hardcore. You're going out you're hiking in, you're bringing your cooler in, you're bringing whatever bug spray and a dust mask and your sunscreen and everything else you can think of. And then you're out there for hours, and you don't know when it's going to end. You don't know who's going to come through. You don't know what you're going to see. I went to a Formula One race up in Montreal several years ago, and I that was a time when I really enjoyed Formula One. I really haven't watched it much since, but when I was there in person, the cars were so fast that all we did was sit in the stands and watch the screens. And I'm like, I could have done this at home and been more comfortable. But with rally, it's like, and you've been out there and you see people and everybody's like timing the intervals, and you see somebody pushing it over a jump, and that their car, they probably shouldn't be pushing it over a jump, but they're doing it. And you're like, that's so cool. And like, props to you because you did it. And you can really tell who's pushing, who's not. And then you're trying to figure out the story. Like someone goes by with their flashers on, or someone's got a flat tire. Like, oh, I don't know what's, so that's the other thing that I tell people is that if you ask me what my race weekend was like, it's different than my son who's co-driving. It's different than my crew. It's different than my wife. It's different than you spectating. If you ask 10 different people, you get 10 different views. Whereas if you're at a NASCAR track, everybody saw the same thing at the same time. And everybody saw the pit stop. Everybody saw the turn 6, or everybody saw whoever get into whoever and crashed. And it's like you all saw it at the same time. But you come away from a rally weekend with your own, magical
yes.
story.
Well, it's like, and the funny thing is, with modern technology nowadays too, like it wasn't at New England Forest Rally this past year, but the year before that when I was there, you find, we're from Bangor area, so we're following Rob, and we're following these people from this area. And so we're looking, okay, John Cassidy's coming next. Boom, you go by, and then we look, oh wait, Rob was supposed to be next, but he's not moving on the course. He's not changing his position, which means there's something up. Then at the very end of that stage, you see him putt along. Obviously, he had some sort of issue that you can find out about later. But it's the cool thing also is if you're a rally driver, some of these people, this is the only rally they do a year, is New England Forest Rally for us in New England. Like there's other places around the country where you only do your local rally. And I mentioned Concord Pond. Concord Pond has this huge crest on it that people get some air on. And sometimes that's their goal. Yeah. How far and how high can I get my car to go? I'm not winning this weekend. I know I'm not winning this weekend. But if I can get some air and people get a good shot of me in the air and they're coming to see me at, Park Expose to get my autograph because of how high I went, that's a win to some people for the weekend. It's like, it's really like, different culture.
No, absolutely. And so Concord Pond, as you mentioned a couple times, it's a stage that's not really long. It's probably one of the most well-known stages in the whole national series. And so everybody, it's a bragging right to have the top time or the lowest time on Concord Pond. It's also, like you said, the jump, like airtime, videos, pictures, which, this stuff used to happen in isolation. Nobody saw it. And so, our goal every year is to beat last year's time. Like, can we do it quicker? And it's like, even if it's a couple seconds, fantastic. And so, mentally we'll kind of push there. We'll put new tires on and we'll try to do what we can because we're trying to do what we can for the fans and our local, we're trying to represent Mainers and the state and do what we can. And it's just a blast. And there are certain stages in different rallies that are like that. And across Canada and across the U.S. And now we have it's a blast, and it's great to see people hanging out. And we, sometimes we joke. We have these moments that are really, when we think back on it, we're like, that was really close. And when we say close, we mean that was close to being really bad. And somebody asked us in Canada how our stage was. It was a tarmac pavement stage at Rallye Bay de Chaleur up in New Richmond, Quebec. And co-driver Getchell said, he goes, well, we saw Jesus and he says hello. And so it's, there are things that happen in the woods that even spectators don't see that sometimes we see. But somehow we have to kind of pick it up and keep going and do our thing. So it's a crazy sport. It's like a gladiator sport. It's us against the equipment. It's us against the weather. It's us against time. It's us against other people. It's us against our abilities to fix the car. Us against fatigue and nutrition and all this other stuff. And wisdom, obviously we've had a lot of years doing this, so we can kind of make some decisions that maybe some newer teams can't make, and make the best of it, even if it's not great.
And speaking of decisions, so New England Forest Rally was supposed to happen in July, as well as the event that happens at, in New Hampshire, Climb to the Clouds at Mount Washington. Those both have, New England Forest Rally 2020 has been canceled, and then it's going to happen in 2021 because it happens every year. Climb to the Clouds happens every 3 years, so they've basically postponed it till next summer. Is the goal for Last Ditch Racing to still push to potentially try to do next summer?
We'll do both those events. We'd love to get back to, there was a time in my life and career when we were doing, I actually quit my job twice, and once in 2005 and once, I don't know what the other year was, but I ended up rallying full time, and which was awesome. I'm not gonna lie, it was awesome. So the benefit of that was that the car was always prepped. I was always working on it. I always knew that it was ready to go. There was a weekend where Dave, he had T1 and I had T2, which was a turbo car, and his T1 was not turbo. And we took T2 to Canada, and we did 2 events. We did 1 event in Canada on one weekend, and then we went to Pennsylvania the next weekend with T1. So we did T2 in Canada. So 2 different cars, two countries, 2 consecutive weekends. So I mean, we did some really cool stuff. We've been to across the country in both Canada and the U.S. We've been to Mexico. A full season for anybody is probably 7 or 8 events, and for a private team, you know, when we start talking about financials,
Mm-hmm.
it's people ask me all the time when I say a race, they're like, "Are you Speedway 95, which is our local circle track?" And I'm like, "No, you know, we're going to, you know, in the woods." So a weekend for us it's a lot. You know, we have to buy a drum of fuel, we have to buy new tires, we have to put everybody up in lodging, we have to feed everybody, we have to get everything registered and insured, which includes the tow rig, the trailer, the car, and certain limits, and we have to get licenses and all these things, medical exams. And so it's a lot for us we talk about team infrastructure, and we have to get all this stuff like ready. We have to get all the tools in the truck, make sure we get all the spare parts. So it's a big effort. And today I was working on the rally car. And of course we're kind of quarantined a little bit and social distancing. So it's just me, and it's really I'm a little whiny about it because it's just me. So I'm doing this one job that I hate, and I knew was going to take a long time, and it did. But the flip side of that is that I did it, and I know it was done right. So it's like a mission critical job. It was involving putting the pedals in the car, so the brake, the clutch, and the accelerator. So that's my interface with the car, and I need to make sure it's done right. And so, you know, it was 4 or 5 hours of doing that. And I'm glad I did it because we touch and prep the car ourselves, we know it's okay. And yeah, absolutely, we want to be at New England Forest. Last year was our 20th consecutive showing there, and then we've done Climb to the Clouds up Mount Washington twice, which was not something I thought we would ever do. You have to apply to Mount Washington, and then you have to give them a resume of what you've done and where you've been. It's probably the only race that you need to kind of qualify for. I didn't think we were going to get in. And then the first time, and then when we got in, I was like, oh my God, I've never been to Mount Washington. I'd never been up Mount Washington. So I had to drive. I drove over with Eric Lee, one of my past co-drivers, and I said, I need to go see this mountain. And we went up it, and I was scared, terrified. I was like, oh my God. I actually went and saw a sports psychologist before we raced, because I'm like, I need to get my head around this thing, because it's not like a regular event. Most people that drive up it in a street car, a regular car, they're terrified. Well, we're going to race up it as fast as we can go. So it's like, so I found that racing it was actually not as big a deal because you're so hyper focused on doing it. So, but yeah, we'll be doing that next year. And I want to give my son the opportunity. He'll be the 3rd co-driver up the mountain with me, and want to give him that experience of his lifetime. You know, I feel like it's if we can do that together, it's a really good thing. You know, and
was a photographer at the reintroduction to it, because Climb to the Clouds has happened, but it happened a while ago, and then it reintroduced again in 2014.
I want to say 14 or so.
I think it's 14. 2014, I was a photographer for Climb to the Clouds, which was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in a media aspect. I've been in the Bruins locker room. I've covered UFC fights. I've done all that stuff. But Climb to the Clouds as a photographer at one of the bends around the corner, especially because, you know, that's a race that like David Higgins does, and Travis Pastrana, and some of these racers that are world class racers and have set records on that mountain. To see them come whipping around a corner and a helicopter flying behind them to catch it for the promo videos or for the internet or whatever it was, and it was just this fascinating. You get this Concord Pond's fun, and a lot of these stage rallies are fun, but a lot of times you look across the road and it's just another tree.
Yeah.
Whereas Climb to the Clouds, you sit there and you look across the road and it's just landscapes of mountains, and it's breathtaking as it is.
People, that's one of the questions I get asked a lot is, have you guys done Pikes Peak? And it's like, no, we haven't. And, you know, and I, it's not that I didn't want to do it, but it's a long way away. And it was a big, you know, I'd have to take a couple weeks off of my life to do it, which, you know, everybody would say it's worth it. Well, of course it is, but I just can't, you know, there's responsibilities. So when we were able to do Climb to the Clouds, because we didn't know it was going to come back, and we had heard it's the oldest hill climb in the country, and so even before Pikes Peak. And for people that have done both, they say that Mount Washington is more technical, more twisty, and more turns. So it's you know, it was an honor to be able to go up there and do it. And it was the first time they kind of had this rally car class that we were in. And yeah, just an amazing event. And you're up at the top, and the weather changes, and the power in the car changes, and you're on tires that are somewhat slick, and then you're on dirt halfway up the mountain. And you know, and it's amazing. Like you said, the helicopter, you come around a corner, there's a helicopter that pops up over the ridge, and you're like, oh my God, there's a helicopter. And yeah, it's amazing. Just amazing to be on that list of people that have done that, and just to be able to think back to it. And no, I'm really thankful for all the people that have been involved in the team over the years. And like I said, we've got lots of people that have gone on and to do other things. And but just for all the co-drivers that have sat with us and sat with me, I should say, and all the crew folks that we've corrupted over the years, and that and all the fans that keep coming to see us, and people that message us and say, when are you coming back here, or what are you doing this year? It's really heartwarming, and we're trying to do everything that we can. It's really, you know, as we get 20 years in the sport, it's I'd like to say it gets easier, but some of it's easier because we know what we're doing. But on the other half is just hard work, and it's hard work and money. And so it's like anything else. And you know, and it's kind of lonely right now with the coronavirus. And you know, I have team members that are like, can I come over and help? And I'm like, no, you can't come over and help. I would love you to come over and help, but not right now.
Yes, you can, but I'm not there. I'm going to go to work. You can work on the car.
Exactly.
As long as I'm not in the room. No, I'm selfishly happy. I'm getting married this summer, right, John? And I'm happy in my mind, selfishly, 100% selfishly, that we are not having New England Forest Rally or Climb to the Clouds this summer, because I won't have to say that I have to skip it because I don't have a vacation time or finances or time off or whatever it may be. That I will get to. And the thing is, if you don't go to Climb to the Clouds, it wouldn't be again until 2023. So then it would be another 3 years from now before I could see that event. So to me, it's like, hey, next summer, I should be able to go to these events now because I don't have a wedding to plan and pay for and take time off. So me personally, when I saw that Climb to the Clouds was postponed, I'm like, oh, shucks. Like, to me, it was like, ha.
So, you know, I'm right there with you, because I have all these other, I have a to-do list of all these other projects. I'm sitting right now in my music studio. And so I have, you know, a lot of things that I want to do here. I've got some other automotive projects that I want to take care of, and other things. And, you know, today I've worked on the rally car. I've worked on my tractor. I've worked on my street car. You know, there's never a shortage of things to do. It's just that something always gets bumped for the race car, including my personal life. So, you know, I'm not, most of us that race are fairly uniformly introverts. We don't like to, we're okay to socialize in a group, like out at the restaurant or so forth. But it's like,
With a
if
couple of beers in you.
yes, exactly, a couple of beers and that kind of thing. But honestly, it's like I'd much rather, I have a pretty significant relationship with my race car, and I talk to her, and we have a talk before each race. There are certain things, ritual things that we do and don't do, and it's not lost on me that what we do is dangerous. We've lost friends over the years doing what we do, and I've got an artificial disc in my neck as a result of decades of doing this now. And but the first question was, when I needed this, was, can I go racing with this thing in my neck? And they're like, sure, once you're healed up. Yeah, I'm like, okay, good.
Thank God.
And I'm like, it does work. So it's and it hasn't popped out, so that's all good. But it's it's a strange thing. And I've talked with this, and I think maybe other drivers and co-drivers would say the same thing. I was at work, and I was in an elevator, and I work at the hospital locally, and my name's on my badge, and I'm in an elevator with a bunch of people, and this young guy looks at me, keeps looking at me. I'm like, what is going on with this? Is a little weird. And he says, are you John Cassidy? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, the race car driver, the rally driver? And I'm like, yeah. And everybody in the elevator is like looking at me like, what is he talking about? Like, what does that mean? And I'm like, embarrassed, not embarrassed, but it's like I don't know how to. There's too much to explain.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost too much to explain, and it's the same thing for you. The whole backstory of what you do and where you do it and who you do it with is a big story.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably have a line that you use to sum it up, like, I'm so and so from OBC, yeah. And I do this, but that's like the short version. And so it's a weird thing. None of us do this racing for fame, and even Travis and Mira and Bucky and Ken and Higgins and all these guys, when they're in the woods, they're in the woods. They're not really, like I said, they're just Ken and Dave and Bucky.
It's another day at the office. It's not
yeah. I think they're actually happier to be out in the middle of nowhere than and in my relationship with Dave Mira, which was brief and very specific. It was I think he was just happy to be Dave and like not be Dave Mira, the BMX guy that somebody wanted a piece of. I'm just Dave, the race car driver today. I'm Dave, the rally driver. And so it's a really interesting thing. None of us do this for the glory. We had Angel Collinson, who is an extreme downhill skier, come to the event, New England Forest Rally, a couple of years ago, and they did a show. And I can't remember the name of the company or the show, but it's on the internet someplace. But they profiled the Subaru US team, a middle of the pack team, and then us as a privateer team. And I had no idea who Angel was, and like meeting Dave, I had no idea. And then after I met her, I gave her a ride in the rally car, and she was like hung out. She helped us do service and do some stuff, and she's really cool. And then I look and I'm like, oh my God, she fell down a mountain like 2,000 feet and survived. And she's like this crazy badass person, but totally like, yeah, this is normal. This is whatever.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And so, I think, like I said, rally's a microcosm for life, and it really has given us a life lesson, a benefit that way. In that, if something's wrong and we need to fix it, or something's happening, and we just figure out how to do it. And there's not a lot of that, unfortunately. And I really, the other part of this is the time that we spend in the shop. The guys that we have, and we have all guys on the team. It's not because we're sexist, it's just the way it is. But we're all making stuff with our hands and problem solving and fabricating and talking about life and relationships and other stuff. It's a really healthy kind of thing. It gets us away from the internet. It's all real stuff, and and I imagine it's kind of like it used to be. It's like more often it was people were just spending their time doing this instead of like, how many likes do I have on Instagram today? And we're all caught up in that. And I'm addicted to my phone, and I think I just got a notification that my screen time is up this week, which is bad. So but it's like, that I have so many people over the years that have taught me how to do mechanic stuff. And now it's like my son just bought his first welder. And so I had a guy that helped me learn how to weld. And so I'm hopefully going to teach my son what I know, which is not everything, but it's something. And then hopefully there'll be other people that help. And these real world kind of skills of making things happen. It's not like this is not a sport where it's like you said, I'm not a driver that just shows up and puts a suit on and I'm like, the car is terrible today. I can't believe that you're giving me this car, because it's like,
why is this not working correctly? Oh wait, it's because I didn't fix it correctly.
I can't drive this. I can't. No, and that's the thing about rally is that you drive whatever you have at that moment, and you do the best you can, and you think to yourself, that could have been a lot worse, but I did a pretty good job with that. And so, and everybody helps everybody else out. And, it's unfortunate that we don't get to see each other more often. And, I wish we could go across country and do do a full series again, but it's a lot of work. And even when I was not working, for those couple of years, it was full on exhausting, and that was without any kind of assistance, generally speaking. So no, we're happy to be from Maine and do this, and there are a lot of teams that have now kind of cropped up and have been doing well, and it's great to see them. And it's not like we started before the dawn of the internet, when there wasn't a lot of like, oh, this is how you do this.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a lot of resources, and it's great because people will ask me, how do you do this? I'm like, well, I just do that. And they're like, really? That's simple. And I'm like, well, I just keep it simple because, I'm old, and it was simple when I did it. So, we just, I don't know when we'll stop. I always tell people when I figure out how to stop. Right now we've been mostly just doing New England Forest Rally and Mount Washington. I'm hoping that we can go back to Canada. When you were talking about co-drivers and stages and that kind of thing in the notes, what's really interesting is that you could put me on a stage in Canada, and any of the rally drivers that have been there, or any event that I've been to in the US, and I could probably tell you what the next corner is going to be, just because it's like, that information is like burned in my head from, under pretty significant chemical, epinephrine and all that kind of stuff, endorphins and that kind of thing. So it's really, I miss some of these places and want to get back there again before I stop.
I mean, taking it into account that you are lucky enough to be able to do this in the first place. I am a kind of guy who is obsessed with rally. I think rally is one of the greatest things that's ever been invented. I think, there's times where we're good friends now, so I wouldn't say I'm jealous of you, but in the same sense, like, I am, because of the fact that you had the opportunity to do this, and not everybody's able to have the opportunity to do this. However, a small sliver of that is that there is an opportunity technically for you to do this. And it's one of
Yeah.
the only sports that I feel like you could race on the same field as
Yeah.
someone who's a professional who does this all over the country. There's people who rally at every year at New England Forest Rally, which is the only rally they go to. And you have experience. You have 20 something years of experience behind the wheel. But as someone who could build a car all year long, it passes inspection, has the safety features to it. They have all the right stuff to do.
Yeah.
They may not win, but they're on the same track as David Higgins, as Ken Block, as Travis
Yeah.
Pastrana, these world-class rally car drivers. You can't do that in the NBA. You can't do
No.
that in NASCAR or soccer or anything. You're not
No.
going to play on the same ice as these people in hockey. It's a unique sport that you have been lucky enough to be a part of.
Yeah, no, we showed up with our Honda at New England Maine Forest Rally, it was called back in the day, and we showed up without a skid plate on the car. We showed up with it was barely done, and again, same kind of thing. All these people, John Buffum and other people and stars in the sport, can't do it anywhere else, and to be part of that. And sometimes, and the crazy thing is that sometimes you're inserted into that person's story. So it might be that Ken Block has a problem and you end up giving them a part or towing him out or doing some other thing, and it's like, oh my God, I crossed. So I'm gonna go sideways a little bit. So Dave Muir was he and I became friends, and I worked in primary care here in Bangor, and he had his bike company, and which was very successful. He was also sponsored by Bell Helmets, and so I thought to myself one day, again, one of these kind of manic episodes where I got creative, and I'm like, I had a lot of kids that didn't have helmets because they couldn't afford them. So I mentioned to Dave one day, I said, hey, can you put me in touch? Just give me a name and a number at Bell so I can call up and see if they want to do something with me and these kids. And so Dave, he said he would, but then at some point he asked me for my address. And so a few weeks go by, and I end up, this like two big packages on my porch. And my ex-wife was like, what did you order for the car? And I'm like, I don't remember. And that's how bad it is when you race. You're like, I don't know. I ordered a bunch of stuff, but I don't know what's in these packages. Turned out that Dave had ordered a bunch of helmets from Bell, or had them send them to him, and he autographed all of them by hand. And so I had 2 boxes of helmets, and I brought them to work. And so we would ask kids when we would do physicals, we're like, do you have a bike? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, do you have a helmet? They're like, no. And I'm like, do you know who Dave Muir is? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'm like, well, he's a friend of mine. They're like, no, he's not. And I'm like, yeah, he is. So I'd go, get them a helmet, measure their head, and we get them a helmet. So I ended up taking pictures of the kids in their helmets, and I text them to Dave, and he would just get a kick out of it, love it. But this is kind of the humanity part of the whole thing, is that there's this, these guys that are at the top of the sport are just real people that want to have real relationships with people that are meaningful, that are not just, what can you do for me and everything else. So, like I said, with Ken or even Travis or anybody else, it's like I could message them and they would probably reply to me, not because we're great friends, but because they know me from the sport, and they're just like, that's cool, whatever. And but I get that a lot, like, you don't know so-and-so, and it's like, well, okay, but I do. It's like, not like Christmas card kind of thing, but just like, yeah, we said hello, we hung out in the woods, and yeah, it's a really surreal thing, and I've been really fortunate, like you said, really lucky. And back to the first question, you said, how did you get involved? I just said, I'm going to do this. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just said, this looks really cool. And I've had a lot of people say, I want to do this, and what kind of car do I need? I'm like, just pick something and just do it. And and at one point we were going to take the team and try to market it a little bit more. And the guy that I met with was like a small business guy here in town. And he's like, you were like the Walter Mitty of, like, you're like a folk hero. You're like the guy I want to be. You like go to work, but I don't know, you have this secret life, and you put on this suit and this helmet, and then you're like, whatever, you're doing this crazy stuff flying through the woods. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, that is so cool. And I'm like, yeah, it is really cool. That's why I can't.
You put a suit on and you fly over Trest. You're a superhero. I don't like.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good to me. And so he's like, I want to be you. And he said, that's the angle for whatever you want to do. It's like anybody can do this. Like, just go out and kick ass and
Dedicate to it too. Like you're not like you just like half-ass things. You dedicate. You're not doing rally this year, but you put your pedals in today. Like that's the kind of thing. It's like the dedication. I mean, one of my favorite comedians is Kevin Hart, and he was just on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about Joe Rogan and him both together are the kind of people who just put your mind to something and just do it. There's like the only way you're going to succeed at anything in life is just to just do it. And if you don't succeed at it, if you rally for the first time and it was the absolute horrible experience, you wouldn't be doing it right now. You'd be like, okay, I learned, I moved on. This is not for me, and I'm going on it. But you obviously fell in love with it. It became a passion of yours, an expensive passion of yours. You tell any of those moms and dads out there paying for hockey equipment, at least your kid's not a rally driver. Exactly. That's what you have to say to them.
No, but you're right. I think they I watched the thing on Kevin Hart and like just his schedule during the day and how driven he is. And a lot of people will say that about me, not they don't compare me to Kevin Hart. I'm much taller.
Hey, John Cassidy is the Kevin Hart of Bangor, Maine. That's
but they'll say, wow, you're always doing something. And I'm like, well, the Foo Fighters have that song Wasting Light, and there's that phrase, the day's wasting. Like, you get up and it's like, what are you going to do today? It's like, I don't ever have a day where I'm like, I think I'm just going to relax and have a nap. And part of that's because it's just how I'm built. I'm wired. I can't shut down, but I want to be creating and building and doing stuff. And the same thing with Mira and everybody else that I've met in the sport. He ended up doing triathlons and rode his bike across the country and did all this other stuff and BMX and built this company. And, all these people have that in common, that they just don't stop. And it's there's this part of being fortunate and lucky to be able to do it. And then there's it's just like OBC. When I think about OBC, I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And this company has just grown and all this stuff. But at the same time, you guys know that you can't rest. It doesn't stop. It's like you don't wake up and you're like, I think we're just going to cruise for 6 months. It doesn't happen. So it's like every year I make a list, like after every event, and usually at the end of the year, of like, what do we need to do for next year? And then we think about, well, what's reasonable, what's not, what's feasible, what's not, and what's going to make a difference, what's not, and that kind of stuff. So right now I'm trying to work on my fitness again and doing that because that's a big part of the sport. And I don't think of myself as an athlete, but we kind of have to be fit enough to do it. And the car's got to be up to the task. And right now we've got a lot of parts we got to replace and fix, and it's rough on the equipment, and and we have to pay for it. So it's like, what do we sell to make this season happen, the next season? So,
but I mean, it's a fun sport to be in. It's a fun sport to watch as a spectator. Obviously, John has fun driving it too. I think John and I could probably talk rally for 3 or 4 days straight recording this. I think we have a blast. I think I have John back on at some point. My goal is, looking ahead, I'd love to have you on, and like someone like Casey, our good friend, who's a spectator who also loves rally, to be on at the same time and chat what it's like to be a driver and a spectator. But I really appreciate you coming on, John. I don't want to cut this short, but I think we've been talking a long time, and people will enjoy this. But I really appreciate you coming on and telling us a little bit more about rallying and your driving and your team. couldn't thank you enough.
So some shameless self-promotion. So our website is not really active. Websites have kind of gone
Yes.
by the side. But we are on social media. So if you look for Last Ditch Racing on Instagram or YouTube, we have a YouTube channel. You can see us crash. You can see us do other things and jump. I think we have some video from you guys up there someplace. And if anybody has questions about racing or rallying, find me on Facebook or any place or Instagram and just message me, friend me up, and I'd be happy to talk about that stuff. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll provide on our website, but also on the YouTube video for this, links to Last Ditch Racing's Instagram. And yes, their website's a little out of date, but you get a little bit of information from your website.
Yes.
Your current vehicle is on there and so on. So, but also thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, John, for joining us. I appreciate it. Until next time, I hope I get to see you again and have a beer with you sometime soon.
I hope so.
Thanks for joining us, man.
See ya.